All right. Hello, Los Angeles. Hello, California. Hello, America. And hello, world. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to our first broadcast of 2018. This is Politics with Roger. I'm Roger. This is where we like to discuss politics. Today is Friday, January 12th. It is about 2:30 in Los Angeles. Diving right into today's broadcast, the main topic or the main story has been the main story pretty much since the beginning of this broadcast, has been the main story, I would say, in our country, in America, for the last 2 years, which is this media struggle, this information war, this battle that's taking place between two narratives. One of those narratives comes from the media industrial complex, from the deep state. If you missed our video from December 22nd, I definitely recommend you at least check out the first 10 minutes of that, where we outline who the deep state is and who the media industrial complex is and the specific players in that. And then the other competing narrative that is coming from the blogosphere, social media, and independent media outlets. It's getting so crazy it's hard to keep up with everything, and it's kind of bizarre world because you have two completely competing narratives fighting not fighting for the truth, but fighting to be heard. And it seems that both sides have their own idea of what the truth is. But whatever it is, both these two narratives that are competing are very, very different. We talked a little bit from the video on December 22nd about how the mainstream media industrial complex is consolidated, specifically in television and radio, down to basically 6 companies. I'm not going to review all that today, but you can check that out from the video from December 22nd. The top story this week covers a little bit about how the internet and the top platforms on the internet are also controlled by the deep state and are part of the mainstream media industrial complex. More specifically, YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook, and Amazon, how they have become basically co-opted completely by the deep state and by our government, and why this is very damaging. And if you recall, we talked a little bit about in the past about George Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm, a couple great books about the consequences of what happens when big government gets control of mass media and basically becomes the thought police and is able to control what is said and what is eventually thought by the masses through mass media. Now, we're not there yet as a society in America, but we keep seeing this creep towards that kind of mass media complex. And this is what we're pushing back against. But the encouraging thing is that the blogosphere and independent media outlets gain more credibility as mass media, and the mass media industrial complex continues to lose credibility. And this is our top story. This struggle that is just ongoing. And then there's so much to share with you guys. It's unbelievable because we did have a lot of news. Again, this being our first broadcast of 2018 since before Christmas. So much has happened since then, and I'm going to try to catch everyone up to the best of my ability. Just a little background again also, when we talk about fascism or Nazism, we're really talking about a government system where big government takes control of big business and basically chooses the winners and losers who can participate in the business system and who cannot. Now, when we talk about big government taking over mass media, that's taking it up a whole nother notch. Again, getting into 1984 George Orwell territory. And this is what we're pushing back against. The top story this week, Thursday, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas breaking undercover videos showing multiple operatives or employees from Twitter, high-level employees, talking about how they shadow ban and censor very specifically people with pro-America posts or pro-America thought, rednecks to use their language, Trump supporters, of course, libertarians. These types of people like myself, have been specifically targeted by Twitter to basically be censored. Now, shadow banning is we're allowed to post and we're allowed to put our opinions out there, but what's happening is they're not reaching any of our users or the people who follow our threads. basically muting our voices. And this isn't actually really news to anybody because we all knew this was going on. It's just all coming to the surface and being exposed by the great work from James O'Keefe, who has done tons of great work, a true blessing in our country, a real journalist. There's been all sorts of not even rumors. I mean, Facebook has been busted also using the shadow banning technique. Google with false searches. Amazon with false searches. All these media outlets, mass media outlets on the internet, YouTube as well, are all guilty of this kind of shadow banning, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So this was exposed this week by James O'Keefe. But again, people are starting to fight back. There's a lawsuit happening now. A guy named James Damore, a former employee of Google. I encourage you to look into that because we don't always have time to cover every detail of every story to get through everything. So I'm just going to leave breadcrumbs for you to net search on your own and come to your own conclusions. But Google has its own brand of speech code, how it's institutionalized. In the case of James Damore, Google, I guess working at Google has a very anti-white male environment that is institutionalized, and that's what that lawsuit's about. Very discriminatory, and this is what we're dealing with. We are pushing back, and we are gaining a lot of ground as well, because I would say the overwhelming theme of this week's broadcast is that the deep state, the mainstream media industrial complex, is getting desperate, and that is why you see them getting more shrill, more outrageous, and censoring even more, because they realize that they're losing their grasp on their ability to control the narrative in the country. And that's the good news in all this. Next Wednesday, January 17th, the president is going to have an awards show for fake news. Now, a lot of us are looking forward to that. I'm sure it'll be hilarious. But it's also very important because it makes a mockery of the mainstream media industrial complex, and in the process of mocking them, also exposes all the fake news that has come across. Actually, and then we'll cover on that next, because you see the Trump opposition in complete collapse. And then we've kind of been reporting on this, and we're just seeing a continuation on a lot of these narratives. For example, the Russian collusion narrative, again, is almost in complete collapse. I mean, you'd have to be really living in some serious cognitive dissonance and suspended disbelief to still believe that the Trump administration colluded with Russia to steal the election. There's been no evidence of this in the 15 months that it's been reported on by CNN and MSNBC. The dossier that was used for the FISA warrant has been exposed as a fake dossier, something that was whipped up and then leaked by members of our own government, more specifically John McCain and the Department of Justice. It's just a total sham. The whole thing's been a total sham from the very beginning, and most people understand this now. You've also seen the mainstream media make an attempt, mainstream media industrial complex attempt to take the president down with stories about sexual harassment, which again have been, they've thrown so much at him, and there have been so many false accusations that this has fallen flat. Now, you still might see the mainstream media, or you still might see these fabricated, manufactured stories. We broke, I guess maybe 30 to 60 days ago, stories about how multiple women were actually offered money to come out and claim that the president sexually assaulted them, and then the story died down. So if the mainstream media could, they would take the president down with sexual harassment, but they're not successful in doing this, and I'm not sure. It might come back to the surface, it might not. But the mainstream media does not have the power to remove our president with any of these dirty tactics. Another tactic that you've seen them use is the 25th Amendment. They tried to roll out that the president's crazy, that the president has, Alzheimer's or some other kind of cognitive disease in his age that makes him unfit to serve as president of the United States. Now, this is also falling flat. This was something that was predicted by Roger Stone back in March. We said watch out for it, and you have seen, CNN and MSNBC and other government officials in this try to float that narrative, but has not gained traction. And again, just they're falling flat. They have lost their ability to set the narrative in this country, and that's why you see them growing more desperate and more shrill. And that brings us all the way up to today, where we have this whole story where the president supposedly, and the president has denied using this language, said that we don't need other immigrants coming from quote unquote shithole countries. And the mainstream media is up in arms about this, trying to make a real big deal out of it. Again, the president's denied using that language, but even if he did use that language, so what? Just trying to make stories out of anything they can, and trying to basically just create whatever fervor they can to create this movement to remove the president from his post as president of the United States. The mainstream media is failing, which is why they seem to just be getting more desperate, more shrill. And, in the long run, we can take this all as a good sign. But you're also seeing them ratchet up, again, attempting more censorship. And this is where things get a little scary. But the good news is, again, thank God we elected President Trump back in November 2016, because this was a plan that was put into place before the election of 2016. If Hillary Clinton was president today, I promise you all this censorship would be happening, and conservative voices, libertarian voices, pro-America voices, nationalist voices would be completely censored, and we'd be in a much different place. You will recall, again, about 30 to 60 days ago, there was a new FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, and the president is aware of what's going on. We're calling for on this show to break up these monopolies, break up these trusts here. Again, the internet's come down to YouTube, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Twitter as really controlling most of the action on the internet. And if they're allowed to censor and discriminate based on ideology, well, something needs to be done about this from the federal government. So that's where we find ourselves, and we'll see what comes up in the weeks to come, because this is something very serious, and it's something's going to be done, because we have First Amendment rights, and again, it is discriminatory. So now moving on, and this is where things get even more complicated, because I didn't really know how to report on all this. I don't know how many of you people out there have heard of QAnon. That's QANON, who has been a consistent poster on image boards like 4chan, 8chan, and Reddit. And basically, in the last 60 to 90 days, people have identified this specific poster as someone who is an individual, or maybe a handful of individuals, who are close to the president, who have been leaving cryptic messages and clues in these platforms that have coincided with actual events that have been taking place in the real world. So QAnon has earned a lot of credibility in the internet world. And I'm going to talk about some of the posts and some of the narratives that we've seen coming from this source. But again, I encourage you, I'm going to have to insist that all of you also, if you're interested in this kind of news, look into this yourself, because it gets very tricky, but it's also very, very exciting. Now, I've found the QAnon posts to be very credible. But still, even with the credibility, they're incomplete. So it's difficult to verify a lot of the information that we're seeing. But we can verify enough information that it's very, very intriguing, and it certainly makes you wonder what's coming next, because the news they're dropping is just so bombshell that you kind of understand why they're doing it in this way, because most people really will not be able to handle a lot of the news that's going to be coming out in a very short amount of time. But backing up, towards the end of last year, the last 90 days of 2017, there were scores of CEO resignations. I mean, CEOs from major companies in the United States, including Eric Schmidt of Google, which we reported on in our last broadcast in December. There's something like at least 90 of them. And, highly. I mean, it's a strange thing. Why are all these CEOs retiring? Then on December 21st, the president signed an executive order basically saying, and this is paraphrasing the law, but any company or any entity or individual that had any kind of business to do with child trafficking, child sex slavery, or illicit illegal activity like that would be subject to have their assets seized. And if you read this legislation, it's essentially martial law in the corporate world. So very, very intriguing. And you put that together with the CEO resignations, it certainly does make a lot of people wonder what exactly is going on. Also, it is speculated by people who are really into the QAnon posts. And again, you can find a lot of these on YouTube if you search. And, you're going to get a lot of information and you're going to have to sift through it. But specifically, the law was written, again, to, I don't want to say target, but it does implicate entities like the Clinton Foundation, again, with illegal activity. And it might be maybe the precursor to hopefully what we've been talking about is arrests of this very corrupt Clinton Foundation, and whatever Hillary Clinton's been up to as far as, giving away state secrets to foreign operators. And then who knows what else, because there's been a lot of speculation about, for example, money that was stolen that was supposed to go to Haiti during the hurricane disaster a few years ago. And there's also a lot of, again, rumor that many kids from Haiti came up missing, basically kidnapped. And, this is following these leads. So I'm not verifying any of these stories, but you get into the QAnon posts and you kind of understand what a lot of these narratives that are out there, it starts to become very, very intriguing. On December 25th, QAnon posted a picture of George Washington crossing the Potomac. Again, cryptic and symbolic from the Revolutionary War about a surprise attack that the American rebels performed against King George's army on Christmas Eve, where we're willing to cross a frozen lake on Christmas to get to our enemies. And a lot of people are saying, again, that this is the storm that Donald Trump referred to. Again, this was about 60 days ago. He had a meeting at the White House with his military and all the the leaders of our military. And he laid out a cryptic line saying, this is the calm before the storm. And people said, what storm? What storm? And he said, you'll find out. So many people on the internet are buzzing that we are in the middle of the storm that Donald Trump had talked about. Now, a lot of people are also talking, can't be verified, but if you look at flight patterns, especially between December 25th and the new year, there was a lot of activity of people planes going back and forth from Guantanamo Bay. Again, fueling speculation that arrests are being made on a lot of high-level people, and that they're keeping it very quiet. For example, and again, just conjecture, cannot verify, but we're wondering where the Podesta brothers, for example, haven't been heard from in a long time, and nobody seems to know at this point. Now, I've been searching and trying to find out when Hillary Clinton's last public appearance was, Bill Clinton's last public appearance, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, George Soros, and I've had trouble finding any public appearances in the last 30 days. So again, just conjecture, but a lot of interesting things going on below the surface. I have to encourage you all to look into this on your own as well. But QAnon has definitely come off as a very credible source. He's definitely broken news. He or she has broken news ahead of the news, and it's just fascinating things to watch. So again, QAnon, take a look at that and decide for yourself. And we talked a little bit about the mainstream mass media industrial complex falling apart. There was a point that I forgot to bring up that I wanted to bring up. This week at the Golden Globes, you see the deep state rolling out Oprah Winfrey as a potential presidential candidate for 2020, which personally I don't think is a bad thing at all. I would love to see Oprah Winfrey run against Donald Trump. But first, let me tell you what this signifies. Number one, the deep state has lost confidence in the Democrat Party, that the Democrat Party can accomplish the goals of the deep state. That was the first thing that it signaled to me. Second is that it looks like the deep state is giving up on the idea of a Michelle Obama run for presidency by putting Oprah out front. Now, I think this will backfire as well. I don't even think Oprah will make it as a candidate. I know she's very popular. I know she's a very big TV personality. But she's been in Hollywood for 25 years. She's been friends with Harvey Weinstein for probably that entire time. And now she's trying to position herself as some kind of champion for women and the Me Too movement, when in reality, she more than likely knew the whole time about all the sexual harassment and worse taking place in Hollywood, and that would be exposed. So you see the deep state, again, I see this as a desperate measure, that this is the best that they could come up with. It also signifies that the deep state understands that they are not going to be able to remove Trump through illegitimate tactics before 2020. So a lot of people might have been saying, oh my gosh, they're floating Oprah, what are we going to do? I'm thinking I think it revealed a lot about the weakness of the deep state, the weakness of the mass media industrial complex. And I think it's a great thing. I hope she does get the nomination, because I don't think she's going to be a threat in the 2020 election. Moving on to other news, InfoWars broke this week, something that we've been talking about. Again, the domestic terrorist organization known as Antifa had documents exposed. This going all the way back to Baltimore, and this is very serious. Again, I encourage you to look this up on your own. I mean, I'll flash the story here and show excerpts, but look into this on your own, because this has everything to do with the Strong Cities Initiative. This has everything to do with creating chaos to bring in a national police state. Now, basically, what these documents were saying, they were tactical by nature, saying that Antifa and the people in Antifa would be basically allowed to destroy certain parts of the city, and that the corresponding police in these cities would stand down. And they're hoping to create so much chaos that basically martial law would be called in, and outside forces would be forced to be called in, maybe like the National Guard or NATO, again in correspondence with the Strong Cities Initiative. Now, something that I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, all these plans, the plan to censor conservatives on mass media and social media, the plans to create martial law and chaos through riots, these were all planned before the election of 2016, and basically they just didn't think that Hillary Clinton would lose. And if Hillary Clinton were president, I promise you these would be dialed way up. But what we're seeing is that they're still executing these tactics, despite the fact that Donald Trump is president. They being the deep state. Again, if you don't know who the deep state is, check out our video from December 22nd of last year outlining who these operatives are. But they're still rolling out these tactics and trying to gain traction against we, the American people, and we keep pushing them back. But this is the smoking gun when it comes to Antifa, when it comes to George Soros and his funding of this terrorist organization. And this is illegal, and I hope the president acts and puts an end to this, because this is, you have freedom of speech, but you can't, you're not allowed to pay people to start a riot, and particularly if you're a foreigner. So, George Soros hasn't been seen for a while that I can tell. And it makes me wonder what happened over the Christmas holiday, and if anything's going on with him. But anyway, illegal activity, we got the smoking gun, and it's something that we are to keep our eye on. Oh, also, again, previously that we mentioned, again, with QAnon, that was very important that I left out, was the where is Julian Assange? It's looking as if Julian Assange has been extradited from his... he was holed up and unable to travel anywhere. But it looks like that America, or the Trump administration, is going to give him a pardon. And for all intents and purposes, looks like he is now under the protection of the Trump administration. And that's key because Julian Assange holds a lot of the information that will be the smoking gun to a lot of the arrests that are going to be made, or maybe that have already been made. We talked about this pre-election. You could see it on Facebook posts and stuff that we had put out before the election, but about the sex trafficking and child trafficking on an international industrial level. Julian Assange had broken a lot of this all the way back in 2016, but it's all coming to the surface, something very important. Now we'll just touch up a little bit on some of the other stories going on and to look into. I want to talk about foreign policy. We've been reporting that North Korea, that Trump has basically put out there, the president, that we will be invading North Korea, that Kim Jong-un will be removed from North Korea no matter what happens. Not even because of Kim Jong-un himself. It has more to do with the geopolitical balances and how the deep state and also other operators like China and Russia have used North Korea as a proxy to basically create trouble around the world. Now, Donald Trump mobilized our military, and if Trump is bluffing, it was a good bluff because North Korea has pivoted and is now in communication with South Korea for the first time in decades. So we definitely got the attention of North Korea. Does this mean that there will not be an invasion? I don't know. But you see the tactics working. So that was something to point out. Another big story is what's going on in Iran. Now, we saw unrest happening in Iran last week, not unlike the unrest that we saw in 2009, where basically the young people of Iran are sick and tired of the tyranny by the mullahs and the theocracy that is the government in Iran. Now, there were mass demonstrations. Now, Iran shut down the internet, shut down a lot of the media that's coming out about what's happening there. You saw Donald Trump come out and support the revolutionaries of Iran, saying that we would back them, the nationalists of Iran. And, this is completely the opposite of what Barack Obama had done in 2009 by supporting the mullahs. And the mullahs were successful in putting down this uprising. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. This would be huge international news. It would just be a wonderful thing if the theocracy of the mullahs were overthrown in Iran and there was a political revolution there. It would be nice to see the nationalists take over. This would piggyback what's already happened in Saudi Arabia. You see a lot of things happening in the Middle East. I mean, when Trump took over as president and declared that we would be throwing ISIS out of all the Middle Eastern countries, it was underreported. Many of these Middle Eastern countries are sick of the theocracy, are sick of ISIS, and I would say that goes for the people of Iran too. They're ready for modernization. Modernization, by the way, without Americanization, which means that not these countries are not enthusiastic about adopting liberalism or our pop culture, which would include themes of homosexuality, I guess I would say a hyper-tolerant posture, of transgenderism. These countries are they're not enthusiastic about adopting this part of Americanism. They are very enthusiastic about modernization, but they're not enthusiastic about the liberalization of these kind of American pop culture phenomenons. And I find that very interesting, and I don't blame them. And we'll see what happens moving forward, but keep an eye on Iran. And finally, just a few stories that are going on. We're not going to touch this now, but just keep an eye on something that was talked about. We saw the betrayal by Steve Bannon to the libertarian movement. We can get into that a little bit more, but anyway, it was a betrayal. and Steve Bannon is now out at the White House and basically out at Breitbart as well. You see the immigration debate taking place right now, so that's happening. I know that is very volatile, and we'll see how that all shakes out. And again, we are still seeing a surging economy. Trump's tax cuts towards the end of last year seem to be helping out even more, and our economy here in the United States continues to surge. So we'll keep an eye on all these things moving forward. Thank you again for joining us here at Politics with Roger. As they say, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. And and feel free to debate, or if you hate the show, comment. If you love the show, comment. We can talk about it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys next time.